Chosen woman, as this video begins, someone who distanced themselves from you is staring at their phone screen for the 10th time in the early morning hours, rewriting messages they don't have the courage to send. He tells himself it was just a phase, but his heart beats out of rhythm when he realizes that the perfume on the pillow no longer exists, that the good morning messages that inflated his ego stopped coming. The urgency is in the air because reality hit too late. When you said enough to the crumbs, life activated a simple and implacable principle: respect calls for respect. What once seemed like control became silence. What seemed like freedom became emptiness. And that emptiness screams. She, the chosen woman, didn't distance herself out of whim. She withdrew out of dignity. When she set boundaries, she repositioned the story on the right track. Life's moral law doesn't punish, it educates. That's why he wakes up startled, missing the laughter that guided his days and the small questions someone asked to care for him. Regret isn't born from nothing. It sprouts when absence becomes a teacher and conscience becomes an open notebook. He reviews conversations, remembers the times you asked for presence and received distraction. He realizes he confused affection with obligation, attention with demands, loyalty with routine. Now, everything that seemed small shows its real size. The chosen woman moves forward. She tends to her faith, organizes thoughts, nourishes body and soul, reclaims dreams that were stuck in pauses too long. It's not insensitivity, it's maturity. When she decides to belong to herself, a new energy settles in. Photos don't ask for approval, days don't walk in neediness, nights don't carry the anxiety of a response that never came. On the other side, he feels this change without knowing how to name it. Her serenity disarms his vanity. Her free laughter dismantles any comparison with new company. Nothing has the same texture because nothing was cared for with the same truth. It's in this clash between who she became and what he didn't know how to be that awakening gains speed. He sits on the bed, takes a deep breath and recognizes that he didn't lose just any woman. He lost an emotional home, an affection that demanded presence instead of promises. He discovers that last-minute attention doesn't heal old neglect. He understands that it's not about reconquering with words, but about reviewing his own posture. The urgency now is different. It's not about sending messages in a rush, it's about facing the mirror without excuses. The heart asks firmly, who do I need to become so I don't hurt again those I claim to love? The chosen woman doesn't rush to check the change, she observes. She knows that haste is a short path to repeating patterns. She feels that life has opened a sacred space for her to flourish while he learns. If there's ever a reunion, let it be with another quality of presence, not with disguised nostalgia. Therefore, she remains at the center, protecting the peace conquered at the cost of tears and firm choices. The awakening has already happened. What is decided afterwards doesn't depend on the crying in the early hours, but on the character that is born when pain becomes responsibility. That's when the story stops being just longing and begins to touch the ground of transformation. Chosen woman, when pain hits his heart with force, it's not just suffering, it's a calling. The man who caused hurt can no longer sustain his confident persona, because absence tears down the ego's shortcuts. He tries to fill the hole with distractions, but everything loses flavor. The early morning hours, which were once a spectacle of self-confidence, become a classroom. There, without an audience, he sees the exact trace of the choices that brought him to this point. It's not destiny against him, it's life returning the result of what was planted in days of neglect. And transformation only begins when he stops arguing with reality and accepts that it hurt because truth was lacking. The death spoken of here is not physical, it's the death of the character who justified his own shortcomings. The man who called loyalty routine dies. The one who confused presence with favor dies. The haste that promised the world in the morning and forgot by the end of the day dies. This morning is hard because it hits vanity and disarms excuses. But it's necessary, for only then is born the man who looks in the eyes and sustains what he says, who doesn't beg for forgiveness but works for reparation. He learns that repentance is not a passing emotion, it's a repeated decision, every day, when no one is watching. While this crossing visits him, the chosen woman strengthens her own essence. It's not a time of waiting sitting by the roadside, it's a time of cultivation. She organizes her interior, reaffirms boundaries, nourishes spirituality, returns to caring for what makes her vibrate. She understands that her value is not in being chosen by someone, but in keeping herself chosen by herself. This posture doesn't close doors out of pride, but also doesn't open windows out of neediness. She continues with serenity, perceiving that his process is not a spectacle for her to watch, it's a destiny adjustment in which she may or may not participate, depending on how everything aligns. In his heart, pain transforms into a search for coherence. He seeks advice, faces conversations he once avoided, reviews self-discipline, learns to apologize without attaching justifications. He discovers the weight of asking for forgiveness without demanding return, because he understands that reconciliation is not negotiated, it's earned. He begins to care for small gestures, responds with presence, honors schedules, welcomes vulnerabilities without disdain. He learns to listen beyond words, to notice when her gaze asks for respect and when her silence asks for space. This migration from discourse to practice is the discreet sign that something alive has begun to be born. For the chosen woman, the spiritual vision of this moment is clear. It wasn't pain that elevated her, it was the choice to treat it with consciousness. She doesn't romanticize suffering, she just transforms it into wisdom. By realizing she doesn't need to prove anything to validate her worth, she breathes lighter and walks with steps that don't tremble when hearing the old phone ring. If there's to be a reunion, let it be on ground where peace won't be at risk again. If not, let peace remain as a guide. Either way, she doesn't negotiate what costs so much to rebuild her own dignity. It's in this scenario that life prepares the next verification. Because pain without learning is a cycle, and pain with learning is a passage. He's discovering that it's not about winning back an affectionate title, but about becoming a man for true love. She's experiencing the strength of remaining whole, without losing delicacy. Between what breaks and what realigns, a new field emerges, where sincerity leaves clear trails. And it's in this field that signs begin to appear, not as promises, but as constancy. What comes next doesn't depend on emotional phrases, but on what resists time, the concrete marks of genuine repentance. Chosen woman, when change is real, it doesn't arrive with fireworks, it arrives with constancy. The man who crossed through pain and understood what he lost begins to speak the language your heart understands. Daily attitude. He doesn't try to gain points with beautiful phrases, doesn't ask for proof of love, doesn't dramatize his own faults. He wakes up to the simple things that sustain bonds: presence, coherence, responsibility. Haste gives way to care. The shortcut yields space to the entire path. The first sign is born in the silence where he stops justifying himself. There's no, but you too. There's no blame transfer, there's no adjustment to seem better than he was. He tells the truth about his own choices and accepts the result they brought. He asks for forgiveness without demanding return, because he understood that forgiveness is a seed and reconciliation is a harvest, and between one thing and another there's time, pruning and preparation. This new internal place is noticed because the conversation becomes clean. Another sign appears when habits change clothes. What was once a promise transforms into observable routine. He begins to care for schedules, honors agreements, responds with attention even when there's no audience. He disconnects distractions that once dominated, learns to say no to situations that distanced him from what he claimed to value, seeks help when he realizes he can't sustain alone. This change doesn't ask for announcement, it reveals itself in daily details and can withstand being tested. Genuine repentance is also perceived in the respect for the feminine heart's rhythm. He understands that his pain doesn't authorize invading processes, so he doesn't pressure responses, doesn't accelerate meetings, doesn't try to buy trust with gifts. He gives space for her healing to happen her way, because he recognizes that haste is ego and that emotional security is born slowly. When he accepts the chosen woman's timing, he shows he learned to love without trying to control. There's also care for the wounds he himself opened. Instead of minimizing the marks, he treats them with delicacy. When a sensitive subject arises, he doesn't cut it off, doesn't ironize, doesn't turn his face away. He listens, validates, asks how he can repair, sustains the conversation until her heart feels firmness. That's how energy changes. The old defensive stance gives way to a protective posture, not out of pity, but out of responsibility. Finally, authentic transformation appears in how he looks at his own life. Repentance stops being a project to win you back and becomes a commitment to never again hurt those he loves. He improves as a son, as a friend, as a professional. He organizes finances, cares for his body, adjusts character. When change doesn't depend on your presence to continue, the truth is laid bare. That's when you feel, without effort, that something has matured. Chosen woman, these signs are not a script for perfection, they are clues to a new path. They don't ask you to forget what you lived, they ask you to observe without illusions. If constancy is maintained, trust can begin to be born again. If constancy fails, you know where to step. And it's here that life brings the question that defines the next stage, because signs are only half the story. The other half lives in the center of your power to choose what keeps you in peace and what throws you off axis, and it's exactly to this point that our conversation is heading. Chosen woman, here is the territory where your peace protects itself and your destiny organizes itself. The decision is not born from the fear of losing someone, it is born from the commitment to not lose yourself. After pain has taught and signs have appeared, it is you who defines whether his repentance will be a bridge to reconciliation or just the last chapter of a story that fulfilled its role. Conscious choice is different from impulse. It looks at facts, honors intuition, and considers the body, because the body speaks when the soul is not heard. If near him your breathing tightens, if your stomach clenches, if joy requires effort, this is not detail, it's a compass. If near him your heart expands, if your mind rests, if your voice doesn't tremble when setting boundaries, this is also a compass. The chosen woman doesn't decide to appease the early morning crying, she decides to preserve the coherence she conquered. She asks herself if there is enough emotional security to start over without reopening wounds that haven't healed yet. She observes if his transformation sustains itself when no one is watching, if attitudes remain even when there's no immediate reward, if respect appears before desire, if truth arrives before explanations. It's not about punishing, but about evaluating if the ground is fertile for a more mature love or if it would just be a return to the familiar, with new packaging and the same risk. This is the moment to review boundaries with serenity, without building barricades, but without tearing down the fences that protect the garden. Healthy boundaries don't push away those who want to stay, they just organize the encounter. If he understands, welcomes, and adapts, it's a sign he has learned. If he ridicules, pressures, or tries to negotiate your peace, the answer itself has been given. The chosen woman remembers that reconciliation is not a prize for suffering, it's a consequence of alignment. It's not about erasing the past, it's about ensuring the future doesn't repeat what caused hurt. The spirituality of love asks for responsibility with your own light. Therefore, conscious choice considers what you became in this process. Ask if you still like who you are beside him, if the lightness you conquered fits in this relationship, if your values remain present when daily life gets tough. If the answer is yes, the possible path begins to appear with firm and measured steps. If the answer is no, the same consciousness that opens doors also knows how to close them with respect, transforming his repentance into learning for both and not into a password for hasty new beginnings. Chosen woman, deciding is not performing courage, it's practicing self-love. The rush to resolve everything today is usually fear's last trick. When choice comes from the center, it doesn't burn, it pacifies. And pacification is a silent sign of rightness. If the two trajectories are to continue together, let it be in new harmony, with clear agreements, responsible affection, and true presence. If it's to follow different paths, let it be without guilt, with gratitude for what was and honor for what you rescued in yourself. Because your decision is not against anyone, it's in favor of the life that asks for coherence. And it's precisely when your consciousness occupies the command position that the final crossroads emerges, not as a threat, but as clarity. Two paths present themselves, both with dignity when chosen with truth. The question that rises now is not, what hurts less, but, what better sustains the whole woman you became? It's in this question that the next part awaits you, where reconciliation can be rebirth or liberation can be a definitive act of love with yourself, and both directions have different blessings to offer. Chosen woman, when consciousness matures on both sides, life opens two legitimate paths. One invites rebuilding with new quality of presence, the other invites thanking, closing, and moving forward. Neither is small when born from truth. Sacred reconciliation is not a return out of longing, it's a restart out of coherence. Definitive liberation is not escape, it's respect for what the soul understood. In both, the criterion is simple and profound: her peace. If peace grows near him, the heart indicates the direction. If peace diminishes, the answer itself has already been delivered. Spirituality doesn't force encounters, it sustains clean choices, where self-love doesn't kneel to any script. When the story asks for reconciliation, the signs become clear in daily practice. He keeps what he learned in pain and transforms it into routine, presence without bargaining, truth without embellishment, care that doesn't need to be demanded. The chosen woman realizes she can express herself without fear, that boundaries are welcomed as part of the bond, that laughter returns without the weight of having to prove anything. Adult conversations come, objective agreements, plans that include the couple's emotional health. The past is not romanticized. The present is cared for so the future has a foundation. There are handholdings that protect, there are gazes that assume responsibility, there are gestures that sustain what was promised. Love becomes home again because it was aired out, not because it was forgotten. When life points to liberation, the signs also organize themselves with honesty. The chosen woman recognizes that the best of her flourishes from afar, that her body relaxes when she thinks of moving forward, that her inner voice no longer asks for proof, it asks for a path. There's no resentment disguised as strength, there's gratitude for what taught and firmness to not reopen what has already healed. Forgiveness here stops being a bridge to return and becomes the blessing that closes the cycle. She releases the other to his destiny, and returns herself whole to her own, honoring the dignity that cost so much to rebuild. There's no audience for applause, there's good silence, the kind that signals the decision respected the soul. In any direction, what sustains is character. If there's a reunion, he will need to continue learning to protect the heart that asked for care, and she will continue choosing to remain faithful to her own light. If there's a farewell, both will walk with lessons engraved on their skin, avoiding hurting whoever comes next. The chosen woman knows that happiness is not an event, it's a practice. Therefore, she doesn't outsource her joy to his change, nor to his absence, she plants it in the soil of her own daily choices, which includes saying yes to what expands her and no to what diminishes her. Thus, love stops being a risk and becomes responsibility. Effective destiny organizes itself when truth occupies the center. Sacred reconciliation asks for constancy and humility to repair, day after day. Definitive liberation asks for courage to let go without anger and move forward without pending issues. In both, the chosen woman remains with her head held high, keeping the serenity she conquered and care for her own story. The next step will not be decided by haste, but by consistency. Where there is peace, there will be a path. Where there is coherence, there will be blessing. And it's from there that life will write the next pages, with the same wisdom that brought her here, asking only that she not abandon herself under any circumstances. Chosen woman, if this message touched your heart, transform it into action. Leave a like now so more women can rediscover their own strength. Comment on what you will apply today and share with those who need to hear this truth. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive, firsthand, each new step of this journey of healing, reconciliation, and peace. Your participation sustains this work and opens the way for your story to be written with consciousness and love.